I found actually Argila's post about Notus. What is LLMs? Many LLMs,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. So it's a large language model,
Okay, okay. Mm-hmm.
and the sorry, I'm updating the
Yes.
session information, but it's a large language model, and that large language model we actually trained on, yeah, at the ultra feedback dataset, and we
Mm-hmm.
actually fine-tuned it on top of the mixture of experts model.
Yeah, it says it's a collection of fine-tuned models using direct preference optimization.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm. Wow.
And sorry.
Oh, I said so. You guys have made the model from scratch. This one.
No, so it's a fine-tuned version of the mixture of experts model released
Okay.
by Mixtol.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Have you seen that come by the Mixtol paper?
Mistral AI, right? Mistral AI.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you are studying mathematics?
I'm studying mathematics, but I want to do ML and data science. I like you. You can guess that. I so data science and ML and all that is my interest.
Yeah,
But I'm
yeah.
studying mathematics. Yes, and also computer science minor.
Ah, nice. So you're
Yeah.
doing a double
Oh,
master.
no, so this
Uh,
like in US we have major and then minor. So major is math. So main study will be mathematics and then computer science minor. So computer science minor means I'll still do like the main courses, the data structures and algorithms, all that kind of stuff. But I won't do the software engineering, like the big final courses for the computer science.
okay. Yeah, just some courses towards that direction. And which courses are you following?
For computer science, I just have done like one introduction to algorithms. So it's like half of data structures and algorithms
Ah,
in school, and then like some Java and Python. But then all of that I learned it by myself. Like the rest of the coding and programming. So mostly after that I learned by myself. Just some basics, fundamentals I learned from other classes.
nice. And by yourself, on what things did you learn those? On what
What
on
things?
YouTube or?
Yeah, so earlier I did some courses on before I started college. I did some course on Udemy. So
Mhm.
from there I learned some fundamental like basic like Python, how to make good code like clean code and all the fundamentals of Python. So that made me like Python. And one of the reasons, so earlier I was going to do computer science major in my school, but the problem with my university is that they force us to do, if I do computer science major, all the courses in computer science are in Java. So they force us to do Java, and I don't like Java. I like Python. So I wouldn't be able to do any projects in Python.
And then
So
you moved to the
I
US.
moved to math. I moved to in US only. I am still in US. I'm studying in US only. So I
Mhm,
moved to math major. So I switched to math major
mhm,
because of that. So because I like Python. And then so my first data science course in school in university will be this semester. So before that I asked my professor what should I do to learn data science by myself. He just said do some project. He just said that. And then I went,
yeah.
I thought, okay, I'll go to Kaggle and I'll get a data set and do something. And then we became such a complex project that since the whole month I'm doing the NLP, which I told you, the deep NLP project.
Yeah, yeah, you mentioned it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
nice. I think if you're motivated and you really enjoy like the project, then because there's always something extra to do, I think, or
Hmm.
something to fine tune or something to improve. So
Correct.
that's
Correct.
always nice.
Yes, that's why. And yeah, I love it. Like when I began, the first day I began the project, I was wondering like how will I do web scraping? Like I didn't know what Python web scraping. And now I'm like by the time I learned so much while doing the project, I learned so much that I said like the Argilla code I got it working for me. That I migrated the whole code to Pydantic version 2 on my computer.
Yeah,
So
nice. Yeah,
yeah,
so it's also a thing that I think Paco from our side actually worked on today. Um,
okay.
let's see, Argilla.io, Argilla.
Argilla. Yes.
And no, I'm opening the page. So
Okay.
there's this PR that he worked on.
Hmm.
So any feedback you might have would be very
Oh,
welcome.
Wow, wow, this is really great.
As mentioned, there was also a thing that Gabri initially worked on, and now Paco, because it's quite blocking for some people. But yeah, feel free to also provide comments and review these kind of things, because help is always useful, and then you can also see how maybe how he handled the upgrade compared to how you would have handled it, or how you already did it.
Yes, yes.
So that would be still very welcome.
We see. Yeah, he just posted it today, so I got late by 3 days. But it's really good. It's really good that I didn't get like the full version, because if I
Mhm.
downloaded the full version, I would not have learned so much. Like I trying to get it run, I was like, okay, I'm going to fix every single bug.
Mhm.
So every single bug that was coming, I was tracing. I was talking with Chat GPT also. So I
Yeah,
learned how to talk with Chat GPT also, because he Chat GPT gives like really good sources, like information, what you can do and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
It
exactly.
explains.
And I think for both me and or the entire team is either using ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot as well.
Mm-hmm.
Really useful tools, and also for especially programming. If you do something, hey Luigi, nice that you managed to join as well after after some technical difficulties. But I was saying that the entire team is using it, especially if you do repetitive programming. Then these kind of things are super super useful, and also for writing or structuring tests, and just
Yes,
having the
yes,
tab completion available whenever.
yes. I Chat GPT. I just now I found out how useful it can be.
And Luigi, do you feel more comfortable with typing or also chatting? Uh, Otherwise, I will sometimes just respond to your messages.
Mm.
Hi
Uh,
David.
Hi,
Excuse me,
hi.
but my English is very bad. But I interested into to have this meeting. But
Okay.
I will about the NLP, natural language process.
Mhm.
But it's difficult. The URL or the invitation is difficult to connect the first times. But now it's easy.
Yeah, okay, good to hear that. Yeah, because I think they recently app.session, so the company that we use for hosting, was acquired, and maybe there's something changed in terms of the configuration or something. Because Zoom, like Zoom company, they acquired this tool, and now we're actually switching to another one at the start of next month. But yeah, feel free to ask any questions, or maybe share what you're working on in NLP or in life, and maybe we can do a short meet and greet.
Yes, I had a lot of questions because first I am from the Peru, but it here in this country is difficult to set up or to develop a different solution because I interested in your framework because I can see that you developed a suite for training, for example, large model language. It's interesting because it's open source in the first place. But here in Peru, for example, I need this kind of solution because people don't have the knowledge about artificial intelligence, about the natural language process for our education in universities. Because your framework is interesting because I can see that you can training, you can evaluate, you can get metrics. It's interesting for me because I would like to about, for example, this solution because it's important for some companies or what way some companies can introduce this framework or this solution.
Sorry. You're studying or working at the university, Luigi?
Yes, yes. Tell me.
Are you working or studying at the university?
No, I finished my university, but at the moment I look at phone job works because I tell about this because I confront some managers in some companies where don't have the knowledge to apply a natural language process because they don't know because some students don't know the correct way how to use these tools in
Mm.
company. This is a great problem here in Peru
Mm.
because your solution is interesting because when I talk about this topic with manager, for example, uh, they ask me if I can set up configuration or about some solution. When I explain about this, they don't know. They want one solution. They have one solution. This is the old. Okay, it's difficult. Here is difficult. Uh, for this reason, I will, for example, is your viewpoint, what is the best way to apply this framework or this solution they you have or you have been developed, for example?
Yeah, so if you want, and if that also makes sense for Krishna, then I
Hmm.
can also maybe show how to easily use Argilla and just walk you through some examples and some code and some documentation. And feel free to then ask questions and comments and these kind of
Awesome. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great.
yeah.
Yes.
Does
Yes.
does
Yes.
that work for you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Does that also make sense for you, Luigi?
Some example or
Yes, to show some examples and to show some documentation as to how to use it and these kind of things.
no, at the moment no, because I check, for example, for documentation, I follow
Mhm.
Mm.
this person is the Natalia Elvira.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, she work or she is product manager in Argila. I can check this documentation, for example, in my local computer. I try to install to try this solution, but at the moment I don't have, for example, an example to show yours.
Oh.
But I would like, this is the big question. Okay, I can check the documentation. Okay,
Hmm.
I understand. But when I see this documentation, I understand. But the
Hmm.
problem is how I to tell or the correct way to the manager
Oh.
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you uh, when you say this solution, because this solution innovates,
Hmm.
you innovate
Yeah,
in
so
this solution. Okay, is the reason because I would like this solution. But the problem is when I sell this solution to the manager, because the manager don't understand nothing about this.
mm,
They
yes,
want to example or prototype something. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. So I think yeah, one of the things that makes it difficult to convince people about, I think, AI and NLP or like these new tools is that I think people don't really see the benefit out of the box. So there's something that's working and maybe and that can be very suboptimal, but for them it's very difficult to see how to actually what benefit and what gains you're going to get from maybe automating some processes. So for example, if you let's say that you're working with a lot of people that are trying to answer emails in a customer service setting or these kind of things. I think what I would do is see how much time people normally spend reading emails and how much time people spend classifying these different emails, and then you actually have a cost that's associated with the
Hmm.
current situation, so to say. And then based on that, I would sketch the outcome of potentially not needing not all of the people involved in the project anymore, and then maybe replacing them with a very basic classification model that we might offer being used in combination with Argilla. And then from there reason, okay, currently we have situation A where there's all of these costs, let's say 1,000 euros per month. And then maybe for situation B where you would go from that default cost that you have with more the like the old situation to the new situation with we're actually running a classification model or running an entity classification model or later on even an LLM. But I think the most important thing is to start small, so to say, and to really focus on the cost and the why and why they would be potentially interested in adopting NLP or AI within your company. Hello, Rafael.
Hello, guys. Sorry to join late here.
No problem. Nice,
Just to
nice to
check
have.
it out.
I just answered a question from Luigi about how to work with AI adoption within your company and
Yeah,
kind of focus on why, for managers, why it would be better to start using, for example, a basic text classification model and really starting simple and addressing the costs or the benefit that you're going to get from that.
Okay, I understand this aspect.
Mhm.
Other question is because the last year, for example, I developed a system virtual in Watson IBM, but it's difficult. It's NLU is difficult training this bot, for example. Now the technology is the better because you can use the transformers architecture, for example,
Mhm.
coder is more easy. But now the company have a lot of information in a different files, different formats, database, relational or not relational. But
Mhm.
with this technology, it's more easy to get this file process. For example, you tell me about the classification models. Okay, I understand. But what happened when I don't have people to set that labels to the data, for example? Okay, in this case, how use this technology? I understand when you use the classification models, you set up the labels. It's a supervised model, for example. When is the unsupervised model or reinforcer model, or is you have a lot information in different file, how to use or how to help me this technology me, for example.
Yeah, so generally what we assume is that whenever you start a new NLP project, that you end up with having some initial data, maybe with silver labels, so not the 100% correct labels, but some initial labels that have some initial assumptions and corrections from your company. Then you take a base model, like a very big model, know-it-all, like GPT-4, ChatGPT, or any other of these really big know-it-all models, and then you use these kind of models to which are cost efficient, which aren't cost efficient, which are very difficult to host, maybe not as privacy friendly as you might want to use them. And then you have eventually use these models to get some initial predictions and to get some silver labels to add them to your data. And then from there, you actually load the data into Argilla. And Argilla is the perfect tool to monitor, to annotate, to really go over your data more in depth with these initial predictions and to correct these labels. And due to the fact that we already have these initial predictions, it becomes way easier to start labeling and correcting them, maybe not one by one, but also
mm,
doing using semantic search, also using
right.
filtering, using build labeling, and all of these tool things that we've really built in and embedded within our UI. And that should really work from going from this initial assumption for your text classification labels in this case to your initially gold labeled data set. And nowadays, there's also things that you see with, for example, SetFit, which is a very cool framework that really allows to create and train a classifier based on only a handful of labels per sample. And that this is also I shared a GitHub project that I've been working on, which really simplifies the approach of using set fits within a spacey pipeline, so to say, and creating a train test data set really only based on dictionary values. And we don't really need to think about all of the configuration surrounding set fit. So that might be an interesting tool to use alongside these initial labelers, GPT-4. And also the another cool thing is spacey LLM for making structured predictions. And we also have tutorials about that, how you might use Spacey LLM for initial labeling, for text classification or summarization. But they also have support for NER or other things, which we, I think, even also have a tutorial about.
Thank you, thank you.
And Rafael, do you maybe want to introduce yourself or tell us what you're working on?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, guys. I introduced myself, but I have a follow up question.
Okay, cool.
So I'm a machine learning engineer, so I just like looking around, like just to know people here.
Mhm.
I'm a machine learning engineer. I'm from Brazil. I'm Brazilian, and I'm working at City, like at Apple. and I have a like a side project like the MetaText AI. And so I'm still understanding the industry right now. Like, how does like the hype of generative AI affects the NLP task and so on? How do you guys think about it? Like, it's more like a complement of LLMs complementing like predictive models, supervised tasks,
Mhm.
or like a replacement or something. It's like a big question. This is a big question right now in the
Yeah,
research industry and so on.
yeah, I think it's a big question, all across the industry, and nobody seems to be very set on the answer as of yet. Besides that, it's completely disrupting the market, or LLMs are. They have been doing that for at least a year, and they will probably be continuing to do that for the coming months, and years. But I do think that for or what I've seen myself, I'm not sure if Krishna and Luigi agrees, but what I've seen myself is that there's this initial phase of private models hosted by OpenAI, Cohere, and these kind of companies. Then a lot of these bigger models going from 7 billion to 42 billion parameters that you can't possibly host yourself anymore. And now what we've seen with this quantization of models, these smaller models like Phi2, the Mistral models that really perform very well, and also our Notice models, that we once again slowly start moving from this closed source, very private, difficult to host and maintain models to smaller and more dedicated models. And what we also believe in is that we might not have these know-it-all models like GPT-4 that can do everything well, but maybe we'll have an LLM very dedicated to text classification that can do text classification across a lot of different domains. Or we might have these initial models for text classification to teach our small, even smaller models that can run on edge devices or these kind of things, where the bigger LLMs, the foundational models that all of us know, really function as teachers for the smaller models, and that you can distill knowledge from those. So that it's gonna be a way to kickstart NLP projects across different domains, because they span across different domains, and then that you eventually want to fine tune and delve down and make the models smaller and more efficient and more safe, more private. So all of the things that generally the bigger models don't offer.
Yeah,
And that's my view, but I'm not
makes
sure
and
what you guys think about it.
I agree. I agree.
And meta text, you're working on text classification, but then really based on CSV files.
Yeah, it's just yeah CSV files and PDFs, docs. It's like a no-code product that help like people don't that no technical people to build like task classification NLP models like task classifications and token classifications and so on.
Ah,
So
cool.
I started this project like after my master thesis, and like almost like 10 months ago. And yeah, so I got some users, some people, companies is using, but I just figure out, oh, maybe it can be like a full-time job for me. And yeah,
Yeah, it looks very smooth, the tool. I think this tool is their website is way less nice than yours, I have to say. But they are doing something similar, but then also with that built-in labeling thing.
nice. I'll take a look on it.
Maybe it's nice to see for you. And to get back to Krishna, the last line what I said is that the bigger models, they generally don't offer, like they are generally not privacy friendly, or they have restricted open source licensing. They are difficult to self-host, because without a GPU you can't really host these kind of models. Hello, Mohammed. You generally can't host these kind of models, and really need to go from like these very big models to small models in order to do that. So a project that I've been working on myself is this chat interface where you can chat with a chatbot, so to say, having a self-hosted LLM from hosted by Olama, and then you would be able to speak into Whisper, and the Whisper would respond to the Olama hosted model, and then that hosted model would respond, and then I would use these code query models to actually convert that text back to speech as a private hosted version of how to actually use LLMs. But that's something that you will never be able to do privately with these bigger models.
Mm. Also, uh, I guess it doesn't apply for all the models, but for at least for GPT, if you want to access the full capabilities of GPT, we need to pay.
Yeah, exactly.
Once we don't need to pay anything.
And have you guys seen Olama already, or are you familiar with that?
I've heard, but I've not seen much.
Okay. Yeah, it's really cool if you want to get started with these kind of LLMs, and they have a model directory. So it's a
Mm.
website with a model directory with all kinds of models, where also Notice is uploaded and Notix as well.
Mm.
Hello, Mohammed. Do you want to briefly introduce yourself, Muhammad, or not? Just listening in. Okay. So these models, they are actually added there, and via three commands, you can actually host these LLMs privately yourself. So you've got brew install, then I think Olama serve, and then Olama run model underscore name, where the model name can be everything. So there's Mixtral, there's Llama 2, there's Code Llama, like all of these big models that companies have been pushing. And for any private project that I try to do, I actually use the Olama to run them locally. And it's the same. Another cool tool is VLLM for model inference, which is basically the same thing, but then you can run it on, I think, Windows devices, but not on Linux or something like that. But it's, yeah, also really useful package for making all of these big LLMs available to small devices as well, and being able to run inference on quantized models. And I recently also worked on this notebook, synthetic data generation. Let's see. I will share it with you, where I'm actually using VLLM to generate some synthetic data for model, for preference data, for eventual model fine tuning. And that's one of the projects that we've been pushing from the Agila side as well. And that's called Disti Label. I'm not sure if you've seen it come by, but that was also back to the discussion that we had before about what role the LLMs are going to take within the NLP ecosystem, so to say. And we believe that also through the Disti Label package, and maybe other packages that will be out there, is that it would be possible to create synthetic data for instructions and prompts and responses, and actually use this and use LLMs also to actually label data synthetically. Where what we've seen, for example, with the self-instruct paper a while back, from Argela, we are not working on anything for inference of LLMs. Maybe that we will focus on a self-hosted version, but that we offer an API of our own LLMs. But for now, just focusing on data quality and also data labeling and monitoring and these kind of things. But to get back to the story, like for Alpaca, what we've seen, for example, is that they trained this model on this, yes, a synthetic data that was also generated through the self-instruct paper. And similar for ultra feedback, the data set that we actually used for the notice fine tune, that was also like a synthetic generated data set, and really had good results in terms of being completely synthetic and still resulting in a very high quality LLM, even though we had to do some data curation on top of that, which we of course used Argila for. Yeah, working on something for inference for LLMs would be a very resource intensive, and it's something that we ourselves don't really focus on.
Mm.
So we would need to hire people to specifically start working on these kind of efforts, and that complicates the workflow. So there's a lot of companies like Olama, like VLLM, yeah, some other tools out there that can do inference optimization or inference for LLMs very well, and that have the team and the dedication to do that. But for us, we really focus on, yeah, data curation and data quality and model monitoring to ensure that these LLMs can be used, can be optimized, and can be used continuously and optimized continuously throughout their lifetime. Because also, if you have, just like any other model, if you have a LLM running in production, you still want to know if it actually performs on par with your expectations, and if not, then you want to correct and fine tune the LLM continuously. Because there's, for LLM, there's also model drift, and also this term prompt drift. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that. Are you familiar with the term prompt drift?
Prompt drift. Not really, but I think is it something to do with no.
Okay. Just like with data drift or model drift, the what was happening at the early stages of GPT and ChatGPT was that everyone was building applications on top of OpenAI, the OpenAI API, and
Mm.
then based on that, really fine tuning prompts specific to their use case. And then due to the fact that OpenAI is continuously fine tuning and optimizing their model, either to improve performance, but also to ensure that it doesn't show harmful behavior, like it used to do before during the launch. And still, every now and again, we see that it's being hacked or something like that. But then a lot of these highly optimized prompts for this specific scenario started to malfunction due to the fact that the model was changing in the background.
Oh, okay. I see. That's nice. Yes, yes, yes.
For LLMs following the correct template, I
Yeah.
think that there's a penalty thing that you can configure for repeating tokens within an LLM, and also for the LLM, I think there's also stop tokens that you might use for them. So whenever one of these stop tokens, like for example a new line or like a user, like for example a user tag showing up, like the format, that they might not have been configured properly and during the inference time. So what we have seen, for example, within Olama, I will share my screen in a bit, is that people can actually, for each one of these models that they configure, I believe the template and these kind of things that they need to adhere to during inference time. And I will share how much today. So, for example, for this one, what you can see is that, the license, which is irrelevant for now, but that you can actually see the template. And this is maybe a thing that you've configured and set up. And then for the parameters, that you actually need these stop parameters to ensure that the model isn't continuing the generation whenever they apparently ended, for example, some conversational marker within the data. Repetition penalty works. Internally, I'm not fully up to date as to how it works, the repetition penalty, but it can be that, like, for whenever that happens, that the model is penalized, so to say, for either choosing a stop marker compared to any of the other tokens predicted by the model. It could be that you can experiment with that value, yes, but I think by default, if you take the default configurations, it shouldn't differ that much. Out of the box, it should already work. And have you, Mohammed, have you tried Olama yourself? Because initially I also had this difficulty with continuing generations, and then by changing the parameters there, it resolved it. But if you are using, I think, either a Linux device or a Mac like a device, then it should work out of the box, but it doesn't have support for Windows Olama.
Hola.
Ahmed, what are you working on yourself? Krishna, you also wanted to maybe start contributing to Argilla, right?
Yeah. Yes. Pretty true.
Yeah, that would be really nice and always welcome to do.
I know. Have he? So I just looked at the PR that
Hmm.
you sent the link to right now. So I don't know. I'm not able to find the actual code, and there's a lot of files also. But I was wondering. I don't know if you fixed the if it is an issue. The issue that
Hmm.
regex. I think regex has been replaced
Hmm.
by pattern in Pydantic V2. So I have
Yeah.
to. So when I was changing, I don't know if there's some like other higher level change that if you change that, then you don't have to change this, or you have to change all the regex to pattern. And then
Uh,
I did some
um,
more look around. So then I had to change the format of the strings also when I was trying to get it working. So I don't know if that's included here or if I could commit that.
I think I'm not entirely sure. So maybe for Luigi and Muhammad, I can share my screen to kind of show one of the pull requests that we've been working on, and that a lot of people have been requesting, which is
Okay.
the update to
Okay.
Pydantic v2.
Yes.
And Krishna had actually been working on this on his free time and maybe wanted to contribute here.
Yes.
So what we normally do is everything within open source is as open as possible, and that's why it's called open source. So whatever issue may arise within any project, you can generally find it within issues, and people then kind of like, for example, this community member had this question about the new line sign not being responded, and we always try to respond to these kind of issues to the best of our knowledge. But also, if there's a bug or if there's something that you actually would like to work on, what you can also do is like mention that, and that's what Krishna did. So we wanted to start working on this Pydantic v2 issue, and at the same time, actually, Gabri, one of our engineers, was already working on this. So that's why we wanted to go over it. And I believe that Gabri actually had a comment regarding the regex stuff that you mentioned. I think might here Pydantic for but and must be replaced with a field. So it's a thing that yes, we have considered, but I think we have not started work on that yet. So if you want, what you can also do normally, Krishna, is, for example, fork the repository or mention to Paco, hi, I would like to work on the regex stuff or regex related updates. And then what you to work and then normally what we would do is say, okay, yeah, you can work on this, maybe you can create a separate issue, then within that separate issue you would fork our main repository, work on a separate branch, and then from there go back to merge within this branch. And these kind of updates are really useful, and that's also some of these considerations. Besides the regex constraints that are not supported, there's also these boot validator decorators that aren't working, and also these constant and field attributes. If there's any of these things that you want to pick up, feel free to have a look. And besides that, I think there's also a lot of things within the C label that we want to cover. I think these are the docs. So maybe there's also some issues here that might be interesting for you to have a look at. Yeah, one of these things is adding support for the Mistral LLM API. And for Mistral, they have their own like ChatGPT version, so to say, where you can use their API. And for this label, what we normally do is actually have these LLMs that we use for generating this synthetic data, for generating preference data and labelers and these kind of things, to actually go from having no input at all, to a labeled preference data set that you can use for LLM fine-tuning. And as of now, we actually support OpenAI and Hugging Face inference endpoints, VLLM, and Llama C++. But yeah, maybe we also want to support Mistral, the Mistral API, or Olama, or other like API for LLM engines. So that might be an interesting thing that you can also focus on. If you want, I can forward this now.
Yes, yes, please. I have to learn on
These
this.
these things are really open, and any contribution is very welcome, and we also always try to share that within the community, and try to encourage people and share with on LinkedIn and with the world also that you've been working on these kind of things. So that's also good for, I think, marketing, and that's also a thing that is very valuable in open source, I think, is that it's also a calling card or a CV, so to say, as to showing that the subjects that you actually can share some open source code, because often things that you actually do within your own company, they aren't shared, or they are not allowed to be shared publicly, and that's
Right.
makes sense. But for open source, there's also always these kind of things, and for me, for example, I always try to keep track of things. I'm maintainer of some of the projects, and I contribute to some of these projects, and then people can actually see, okay, what I worked on, and it's always nice to keep in mind for working on open source, and you learn a lot of things also. So that's what I really like about it. Do you have any other questions, or?
Yes, I was listening you. So the Actually, if those are still issues,
Mhm.
I think so. The skip on failure, that thing is also not solved yet. That
Let me see. The one for this label, I think
not
I.
this thing, this
Oh,
one.
sorry for the Pydantic port thing.
Yes, identical.
I'm not entirely sure what the status is, but
Okay.
as mentioned, feel free to tag Frasution. I didn't actively work on this myself, so if you
Okay.
would do add Frasution or add Gabri something, then they've been working on these, Gabriel and B, and
Yeah.
then mention that you might want to contribute to this specific part.
Hmm.
Then that's really helpful.
Sure,
Um,
I would love to, and I think I actually have solved a lot of it to get it. So many, some things at least have solved. I think one thing I would say is I think when I was trying to put the skip on failure as true
mhm.
in root validator, so it's so the in the title of the PR it says right,
Yeah, yeah.
root validator must always be set. So I was trying to do that because that's what it says when I get the error. But the thing is, when I do that, it still doesn't work exactly, and I ultimately have to replace. I had to replace all the root validator with model validator, so it's a new function.
Mm.
And
Okay.
then,
So so
yes,
maybe it makes sense to also mention that. Maybe it will help us also.
yes, I
Um,
will do, and it'll also help. I also need to learn the code because I was doing it just get it working on my computer, so I have not done it like in a general way.
yeah, makes sense. So
Yes.
what we've done now is actually created this separate import module for Pydantic,
Okay.
and we call this Argilla, or this directory is Pydantic v1 within the main Argilla directory. So all of the Pydantic version 1 methods and classes, we actually import those within that module, and from there we actually start the reasoning, so to say. So maybe I can share my screen again.
Okay.
Always useful. This one, yeah. So what you can see here is that we have this subthread module, Pydantic
Okay.
v1.
Okay.
Hi, Luigi. Yeah, thanks for being here. And yeah, I hope to see you during the next meetup. So we do these meetups every 2 weeks. And the coming meetups will collaborate actually with a more business oriented company working on annotation efforts and setting up annotation teams and these kind of things. So that might be really useful for you. And I think also Loris AI, company that's really focused on e-commerce and customer care, is going to join. And also one of the projects that I've worked on at the Red Cross, they are also going to present what they worked on with Argella. So I'm really excited about that one as well.
Okay, thank you, David.
Yeah,
Only one question:
yeah.
is it to create a large model since the Argila, for example? I want to create a corpus, a new corpus, set up the data, the lates in the corpus. Is easy? Is use these tools?
Yeah, so in combination with other tools, for us it's really about like structuring the information. And I think for generating your initial corpus, for example, for having this preference data set, you might be able to use dist label. And this is one of the packages that we've been working on,
Ah, okay.
where we have some conceptual guides, maybe. Yeah, but let's see, synthetic. And that's, I think, the collab I shared before. I think it's this one. And it highlights how you might use, oh, sorry, I will share this. And this highlights how you might use this label for synthetic data generation using other LLMs that you can later on use for fine tuning your own LLM, or like having this more dedicated LLM about a certain topic or these kind of things. And
Okay.
that's also where we see the future heading, where you also might be able to generate data specifically for text classification across different multiple domains, or for table extraction or these kind of things. So that's,
Ah, okay. Okay, I understand. Okay,
yeah.
David, thank you very much for this meeting. And I, at this moment, I lead for my job, but I agree
Time.
for you to talk about this topic. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for coming by. Bye bye.
Okay, bye. Bye bye.
So yeah, that's what we've done here. So Pydantic has this internal V1 module thing where
Yep.
we import these kind of things, and then from these imports we actually have these, yeah, the rest of all of the things that we require and actually use.
Okay. So basically, like we import the Python v1 and then try to fix the things in this new file instead of going
So
back there.
what you mentioned about this root validator thing,
Yes, yes, yes.
if it's really plug and play, so to say, the root validator and the model validator, I would
Mm.
say maybe what we would need to do is import model validator as root validator, so to say,
Okay.
and add that specific to these imports,
Hmm.
and then go from there. But yeah, once again, I'm not really up to date about
Okay.
the implementation, except for having skimmed through the code as to check whether it was adhering to the standards and made sense. But I've
Okay.
not worked with it myself. So I think for what's also important to keep in mind whenever you're contributing to open source is
Hmm.
that it's also really important to communicate with the contributors, because otherwise it might be that you're working on something and you spend a lot of time that someone is already working on or doesn't fully align with our expectations, or maybe we already tackled that part of another PR. So it's really important to also communicate that upfront, and to keep these kind of things in mind.
I see. Yeah, I have to learn. I basically have to learn how to contribute because
Yeah.
I
So
don't
if,
that
if
much.
you if you want to really start contributing to Agila and these kind of things, we can also have like a bi-weekly meeting or something like that, where
Yes,
we can go through things that you've been working on, or some topics that you might find interesting, and I can help you with, like, from our side to explain stuff, what and how we think about it, and give some guidance as to code standards and these kind of things.
sure, sure, sure. Yeah, so I do.
I said if that's interesting to you, but
Yes,
yeah, we can start with the meeting that you scheduled for next week. I think, yeah,
yes,
then we can start with that and go over like some of the things that you have seen maybe for this PR, maybe some of the other things, for example, the
yes,
one about this C label that I shared, and then we can review and go over that
yes.
if you want. And also a cool thing, I'm not sure if you've seen that, but we've spent a lot of time on this thing,
Contributor documentation.
contributor documentation, where yeah, we try to guide you
I
through
do.
contributing. Have you
Yes.
seen this already or not?
I saw it, but I didn't go because I was new, so it was too big of a document. So
Yeah,
I've not
makes
read this yet, but I did read the README. I've read the README and the
sense.
Slack. I'm already there, so some of this I read, the top part, but I
Yeah,
haven't.
yeah.
I'll go through it before the
So
meeting.
yes, maybe this part is the most important
Yes,
part. Like,
yes, yes.
and then you can see how, and yeah.
Sure. I have this thing, Pydantic. Whatever I can contribute, I'll be happy. And then I have another idea that I'm thinking about something.
Mhm.
Think so it's basically like trying to add some kind of feature that it'll help me. Oh, wait, yeah, I can actually do this. So what do you think of this? I can add a feature to allow allow what is it? Manually dropping files into Argilla because right now it needs Python integration to dump the files, I think.
Yeah, so the thing that we currently support is just doing it via the Python SDK.
Yes, yes. So I it would be really great if we could also add that feature to drop like drag and drop feature for the
Yeah,
file. In
yeah.
case if the file is a JSON format or a CSV, like the right format, just
Mhm.
drop it in. That would be a
Yeah.
really good one. So I would be happy to work on that. Why? Because it would have helped me. Because
Yeah.
as you said, the server and client thing. So my server or the client, yeah, the server was working fine, and I was able to see everything on the UI. So if I could have just the dropped my JSON files or stuff in there and worked on my annotation and done that instead of having to spend 5 or 6 hours just trying to fix the code to like just get the files on the platform, right?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a thing that we've heard a lot,
Hmm.
and we want basic support for, but
Hmm.
it's also a thing that we that really needs to align with the UI and UX team
Okay.
that we have working on these topics, which
Yeah,
makes it, I think, difficult to work on a separate issue, so to say.
I see.
So for me, it's difficult to say that you can work on that on your own.
Uh-huh.
But uh, let's see. But it could be something that you maybe might work on within Streamlit or something like that,
Hmm.
or Gradio, and then you might be able to present that during a community meetup to say, okay, cool, I was working on this import stuff, and for me it was difficult to actually make this work with Argilla, so that's why I decided to do it in this way.
Okay.
But
Stream. Okay.
do you know Streamlit or Gradio?
Not really, actually.
So
Oh.
so it's like UI components
Uh-huh.
that you can create, and then these UI components are directly linked to Python code.
Hmm. So back end plus front end.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
kind of. So if you say import Streamlit and then Streamlit dot button, then within the HTML file, then you actually get a button that responds to the Python variables that you've assigned it to.
Oh wow. Okay.
Really cool for making demos and apps and these kind of things.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. I'll look at all these. So you said I could work on some kind of prototype version on myself and then present it so they can see if it seems
Yeah.
good.
So if you, for example, have been working on one of these prototypes, then
Hmm.
you can present, okay, I've been working on this project myself. I
Hmm.
use Agila in these kind of ways, and for us, it's really nice to also, yeah, let you show your work
Hmm.
to the rest of the community and to show what people are doing with Argilla and how people are using it. Also, for us, it's nice to see that people are enthusiastic, but also nice to actually, that for you, nice to show other people and to inspire other people as to how to use it.
It helps to inspire other people. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
True. Yes. Okay. First I'll do this one, right? I have to. You said I should ask Gabriel and
Yeah.
Gabriel
If
and
you, if there's
who?
anything about the Pydantic one you can help with,
Mm-hmm. So I'll ask
uh,
him first. Okay.
yeah. And for sure, the one about the Mistral, like the Disty label issue I shared.
Okay. So Fruscian about the disti label and Gabriel about
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
identity. Okay.
Because for the Disty label issue, I know for sure that we want to tackle that. And I know for sure that's really would be really useful if you can help with these kind of things.
Yes.
And
I'll.
for the one about the UI, it's a thing that we want to cover, but it's a thing that's difficult to have someone else work on separately because we really want to integrate that within, yeah, our entire flow. So it's really blocking also for the rest of the team, so to say.
Okay. Okay. I will it be that hard because the UI is there's a lot of space in the UI as it is, right? There's many white spaces. So in one of those white spaces, we could just add one box, like a gray box that you can drag or drop your file here, something like that.
Yeah, but it's also because we want to align it with like the import function, export
Okay.
function, user experience. Maybe we only want to support that for the feedback data set. So probably our basic demo isn't too difficult, but
Okay.
also because we have a like a very strict idea and vision about how the app should behave and how it should function. And
Mhm.
that's more of the difficulty to align with that, so to say.
Okay. So
Um,
okay. So that's like third priority. The first one is the for me is Pydantic, then you said disti label, and then see if I want to do this. Okay.
Yeah, so I think if you want to work on a demo like with Gradio or Streamlit and want to present something about that, and that would be really cool because that also helps us to understand maybe how people might want to import and export data. I wouldn't start working on integrating that within the UI because that's too mixed with all of our like opinions within the company that we haven't fully thought through yet ourselves. So then
Okay.
maybe you would start working on something that in the end, whenever we start discussing and covering these topics, might not be relevant anymore, or we want to integrate it differently, or maybe like in a different way. So that could what I mentioned at the beginning be like something that you've been working on, and then we will not be able to integrate that. So it would be a pity.
Yeah, that's true.
And
Okay.
do you
Demo,
know
but
the
good. Demo is good.
label like labels within open source projects also?
Labels.
For some things, we actually add labels to the issues.
Okay.
So, for example, this is the issue with the label help wanted. These are the issues,
Makes sense.
or these are the issues that are mentioned labeled as good first issue. And that means that we know that they are not blocking for us, that they would be cool to be added, and that they, yeah, can be probably also covered by beginners, so to say,
So good
or
first
beginners
issue is
will
okay.
not be in depth with the code itself.
I see. So good first issue is like anything that anybody can, even beginner can add to the code.
Yeah, that anyone can add, and
Okay.
there's always a lot of overlap with the help wanted issue, and
Okay.
that's, yeah, generally a thing that someone can cover, yeah, and that we really want help with, but that might be a bit more complex.
Okay. So about the so my plan is I can ask Gabri about the pydantic thing, and
Hmm.
at the same time look at one of these good first issues, just some small issue, if I can on one of those, and then I would have to mention it right in the Slack. So
Yeah, you can mention it in the Slack, or you can mention it in the GitHub issue. So
GitHub
there's
is
some issues that also exist, and whenever someone responds there, we actually get an overview of that.
okay, yeah. And then the second thing is I look at the dist label, try to understand it, and then see if I can contribute there.
Yeah.
And then the last priority is to make some demo of the UI thing.
Yeah, I think
Not,
in terms
yeah.
of usefulness
Okay. Okay.
for within our roadmap and these kind of things.
Okay. So this is okay. That sounds good then. Okay.
Then maybe, yeah, we can go over some stuff or some questions that you have next week.
Yeah, sure. That would be really good. Lots of stuff to think about before that.
Excellent.
I mean, lots of stuff to work on. So
How long are you staying in Germany? Or
long. How long am I? I'm staying till 14th.
okay, so two
Go
more
back
weeks.
on, yeah, so 14th I think in the morning or in the evening. Morning I think I'll go back. Then
Okay.
15th or 16th the classes start.
Mm,
So
nice.
then yeah, that's good. I want to be done with my own project also by then, so that I can have something that's already done by the data science class start.
Stuff to do. Yeah. Yeah, if I can have a look at the project, or you need help, feel free to reach out also in
Oh,
Slack.
yes, sure. I will. So one of the things that you just mentioned, I think you were talking with you said about Spacey LLM. So
Yeah.
Spacey LLM right now right now my stage, as I said, right now my stage in the project is I have these named entities, the whole
Hmm.
named entities of the that's been pulled out by Spacey, and it was working on the Encore Web LG, so the large model. It's a bit better than the
Yeah.
small. So I have the named entities list, and what I'm trying to do is like some prompt engineering. Like I'm manually actually it's like 135,000 named entities. So like manually I'm taking like 2 or 3 thousand like a section of the list,
Hmm.
and pasting it to ChatGPT and trying to like manipulate ChatGPT into
Yeah.
finding the science fiction concepts, the technologies, and all that kind of stuff which
Mhm.
are mentioned in that piece of text. So you mentioned Spacey LLM, and I'm wondering if that Spacey LLM makes my whole effort like obsolete. Does it
Uh,
make it because I'm trying to do it manually, right? Put the it's classification, but also a bit about extracting specific things, like extracting science fiction concepts and all that pulls from ChatGPT's knowledge.
yeah.
But
So
Spacey LLM is a yeah, it'll yes.
yeah, so it's doing the same thing. So
Okay.
what they do in the background is there's this research been that has been done in to the way to structure prompts, not
Okay.
specifically prompt engineering wise, as in, but more in a research kind of setting where they apply some of these prompt structuring schemas that
Okay.
specifically work for NER.
Hmm.
and that might be that might be really useful for your case. Another thing that whenever you are going to, for example, fine tune your own model,
Okay.
is maybe span marker is really useful for small scale, for few shots, so to say, few shot entity recognition tasks. And
Okay.
there's NER Foundation model. This model that has been specifically pre-trained to, yeah, to be fine-tuned for the task of NER.
Wow, this is so good. So this is already a model that's been trained for NER.
Yes, but only for through the, so to say, pre-training, so it doesn't do NER yet. So
Okay.
you would still have to fine-tune.
Wow. Foundation model.
Fine-tuning is supposed to be more efficient and more effective.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's just what it's saying. You could try use a GPT-4 with a good prompt, and it might be enough. However, if you need to process a lot of documents, yes, exactly my issue. So yeah, it makes sense. This one is good. Wow.
So yeah, so maybe that these are useful tools, and
Mhm.
like the Space LLM one is probably the easiest way to get some initial predictions, and that
Right.
once again dials back to having these big models for initial predictions. Then you would label them or correct them within Argilla, and then you might use span marker with the new mind model, for example, to fine tune a NER model specific for your task
Mm.
without relying on these external LLMs supported by Space LLM.
This sounds really good. So it makes the our project like independent basically, because yeah, exactly, because I was also thinking that my project, because I like class based, like modularized code and all that kind of stuff. I like that, and I'm making the code independent.
Mm.
And I see that, oh, finally I do need to like include open API integration that depends on somebody having the API key, or I have to manually go and talk to ChatGPT. And that's the big issue, that someone else who downloads my code, they can't just go and easily play with my code, because they'll have to do the same thing again. They'll have to spend like
Otherwise,
4 hours.
you need to pay and ensure these kind of things, which is,
Right.
yeah, be not the best practice for
Yes.
for for accessibility for everyone. But yeah, of course, it's nice to be able to make money for companies, and it makes sense because eventually companies do need to make money. But still, there's also open source companies that can be open and have all of the functionality open, and then for the more difficult advanced things, really rely on big corporations for getting their profits.
Hmm. Makes sense. Yes. Yes. Wow, so much learning to do. I have to structure like which articles I'll read first, which articles I'll not read first, because you said so many articles here. With Luigi also, you shared several many articles. So all that I pasted in WhatsApp.
Yeah, nice to keep track. I do the same with a
Yeah,
message.
basically, I either take a screenshot or paste it in WhatsApp or something like that, so I can check the link. But yeah, thank you
Mm.
so much for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then I hope to see you next week.
Yes.
Maybe.
Oh, next week. Okay. Oh, in
Or
our meeting, I thought the community meeting. Okay.
yeah, yeah, but we have our meeting to discuss the
Yes, yes,
maybe contribution stuff and these kind of things.
yes, yes. Yeah, I need to figure out how to do all this. I haven't actually started using GitHub much. So I was thinking when my project is done, then I'll upload this project to GitHub and make my GitHub page, and then from there I'll start my GitHub journey.
Okay.
But after the
Yeah.
project, but I'm seeing that now I have to learn GitHub even before it's done. So
Mm.
I
Yeah,
should. Good.
ChatGPT can help.
Yeah, yeah,
I also ask ChatGPT for these kind of things.
yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, have a nice evening, and then see you soon, I hope.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay. See you. Have a good day. Evening. Bye.